I think it goes without saying that the wide angle lens is really a staple for landscape photographers. And I know for myself, my 16 to 35, I've probably created 40% or more of my portfolio with that lens. So we say, well, why is that? You know, I'm wondering that now. Why is it such a popular lens to use? And I guess I can only answer it for myself, but for me, it gives me the ability to capture the entire essence of a location and incorporate multiple layers of detail and interest that I can see in my peripheral vision, not just where I'm focusing at a given point in time. Now, of course, this can be the detriment of the lens in the sense that maybe we're sometimes getting too much. But at the end of the day, it's something that I feel is needed for me in order to really convey my vision of a location, which often includes multiple subject matters. There is usually always one primary subject matter, but the lens itself, the wide angle, gives me the ability to add in several other elements, which, like I said, it's not only telling the story of a location or trying to capture the essence of it, but it's allowing me to add layers of depth and detail to the frame as well. And that, of course, can be done at other focal lengths, but I think it's definitely a handy lens to have. And for me, and I know many, it is the main workhorse because of the fact that there's very few limitations. If we see something close to us and we want to incorporate it with something far away, we typically can. We're not limited in that regard. So one of my first tips with using a wide angle, first and foremost, is when you're in that general area where you might want to start trying to create an image, narrow down what the main subject matter is and try and have something that actually stands out from the rest of the landscape, because it's going to be a lot easier then for the viewer to be drawn into that. So for example, if I was to photograph this direction right now, yes, there's beautiful things here. We've got waterfalls, ferns, river, granite slab, side of the mountain, lots going on, but there's not really one clearly defined subject matter there. So if I was to photograph facing that way and someone was to look at that image, they could get a little bit lost in regards to where are they meant to be drawn to? What is the main focal point? What's the whole purpose of the frame? Sometimes we can get a little bit too caught up in, wow, look at all this, and you're just snapping away. And there's nothing there really for someone when they view that piece to take in and behold and understand what you're trying to showcase. Look for that main dominant subject. Now, if you look behind me, we have a perfect example. This beautiful mountain peak. Look how much that stands out. One, it's symmetrical because we've got that pyramid type shape. It also happens to be framed up via the valley as well. So it's got a good natural framing. If I take an image this way, it's pretty clear that the eye will be drawn to that. Now, I'm not saying you always need to have a huge, dominant, beautiful mountain. I know that's not practical or even possible for a lot of people. But just start to break down in the landscape something that does stand out. And sometimes it's up to you to make it stand out with your framing. But you got to figure out first and foremost what that is for yourself. Then you can work from there. Let's say you've established what the main subject is. The next part now is figuring out the framing. And like I said earlier, the whole point of a wide angle is that it gives us the ability to encompass so much of the landscape along with that subject matter at the back. We're not restricted to just shooting what's off in the distance, but we can incorporate so much more. You need to start to narrow down a few elements and simplify things. And for me personally, the workflow is essentially asking myself the question of what am I enjoying about being here? What is it that stands out to me the most? And I think really, you know, what resonates with you? It's what I sometimes call taking notes. Just start to take mental notes about those little details that you're seeing and enjoying, and that's going to help you narrow down what you include in your frame and what you exclude in the frame. So for today, what I'm really liking is the river, but especially the portion of the creek here, the river, where I'm getting some of those white cascades. It's breaking up the tones. At the same time, I do like this upper portion where I'm getting, there'll be a slight reflection in there as we come around, and I like that it's very clear so I can see the stones. I'm wondering if I'm able to incorporate both of that. I also like the plant life along the shoreline there, the bank of the river, but I don't know if today I necessarily want to make that a major part of the frame. That could just be a complementary part that will be there too. There's not too much that I'd like to exclude today, mainly in the sense that I probably don't want to go too wide and incorporate a lot of the sidewalls here, because that might detract a little bit from the mountain in the background. So I'll probably just keep an eye on, all right, how wide am I going? Are some of these granite walls on the side, because it's the same color tone as the main subject, are they going to take away a little bit from the mountain? Now, thankfully, I've got some nice atmosphere and low cloud up there, which is breaking up those tones, so it's not going to get too repetitious and potentially draw the eye from there. Now, let's get in now and talk about composition and how important height can be, as well as overemphasizing the foreground. I'm really liking the flow here and the lines that are getting created from the rushing water. And there's a really beautiful natural frame back there. Because it's a glacially carved valley, we get that nice U shape. And what that does is frame up symmetrically the beautiful mountain in the back. Utilize a foreground that's going to help lead the eye to the back. We don't want the foreground to steal the show. The height really plays a major role, and one thing I want to suggest is not getting too low. What can happen, and it's not always the case, but just keep an eye on it, your foreground can now close off the midground, and suddenly the foreground is immediately hitting that background, and there's no midground, there's no flow or breathing space for the eye to travel through to the background there. There's nowhere for the eye to transition from front to back. It just goes front, back, and that's it. Move yourself slightly up so you're no longer shutting off that midground. So just have a bit of a play there with your height. Keep an eye on your horizon as well. Very rarely will I have the horizon in the middle of the frame. Most of the time I'll tilt down partially and do something, for example, like a 40-60 split. So horizon up will be 40% of the frame, horizon down will take up 60%. And what that does is it partially emphasizes that lower portion, so the eye should intuitively go there first and flow through to the background. And that's the whole point of this foreground, is to, again, remember, help lead the eye into that background. If you're tilting upright slightly, the eye will most likely want to go to the top portion first. And if you don't have the right elements there to lead the eye in, then the eye will have to wander from there and it won't flow as effectively. So horizon line placement is really something to keep in mind as well. In regards to composition and just leading the eye, one thing that is often overlooked is the role the darkness and light play, and how ultimately the eye is drawn to light. And we should be using, in our frame, in our composition, darker edges, top, bottom, left and right, and having the brightest portion in our background in order to help that eye flow effectively. Yes, we do that compositionally with shapes and lines, but tonality plays a huge role too. So my tip now is try to avoid foreground matter that is very bright. If the foreground's too bright, it's not going to allow the eye to flow to the background. So I've got a beautiful scene here, and you can see that there's a lovely leading line. All this framing is great. I love all this, but the light is way too harsh. I want to incorporate these cascades here, but it's just too bright. I'm going to wait. I'm going to do some example shots for you, and hopefully when the sun pops behind that cloud, we'll lose the light here and be able to get an effective frame. But look how good that is back there. But I need that to be brighter than down here for the eye to flow. So I'll do a few example frames and show you. The light is really making it scream. Now it's dropping off, so I'll do a few frames here so you can see the difference where I've got that harsh light on there, and then the frames where I don't have the harsh light. And thankfully we've still got that beautiful light in the background. Consider dark to light, lead the eye. You might have to be patient, or you definitely will have to if you want to be a landscape photographer. Here comes the sun back now, so it's just blowing it out again. Look at the difference. So just read the weather, have a look. Is there cloud in the sky? Is there not? That even helps in regard to sunsets and understanding about color and what makes nice color on a sunset. Let's summarize everything. Make sure your main subject stands out from the environment so the eye can find it and latch onto it. Don't overemphasize that foreground. Use a foreground and midground as a way to lead the eye and just complement the main subject matter. Keep an eye on the horizon. If it's in the middle or if it's placed too low, the eye may skip the foreground altogether
and go straight to the main subject or the sky, and then somewhat be left wandering from there. So consider tilting down slightly so the eye will intuitively start in the foreground and then flow on to the background. And darkness, light. The eye will be drawn to light, so use darker edges in order to lead the eye towards the light, which will hopefully be somewhere where that main subject is. Alright everyone, I hope you picked up a few tips there. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you want to learn even more, just check out the link below in the description. See you in the next video.